no short supply.
Don't do it! Fuck!
Regroup.
Fuck! Fuck!
Battle is timeless, after all.
Fuck!
This is Darkest Dungeon. Welcome to the first of this new series you should play, where I'm going to recommend things that I really like and think are worth giving a try. Today's episode is going to be covering Darkest Dungeon, an independent turn-based strategy game that prides itself as being extremely difficult. This game was developed by Red Hook Studios, a team of 9 people, who kickstarted the game in 2014 and released it for early access in 2015. And I've been playing it since the early access, so this game has gone through quite a lot of changes before it was officially fully released in 2016. Now, what I intend to do with this series is recommend things that I think are worth trying out, but some of them are going to have a little asterisk next to them. This is one of them. I think this game is excellent, but I don't think it's for everybody. The game opens up saying this is a game where you have to make the best out of bad situations, and they aren't lying. This game is going to seem very, very unfair at times. It's going to be very frustrating. The game's quote-unquote RNG, random number generation for those who are uninformed, is very unforgiving and completely stacked against you. So if that doesn't sound like something that's your cup of tea, then I recommend maybe watching a Let's Play or people streaming this game because it is popular. Because if not, then I think you will definitely sorely regret your purchase, like all the salty reviewers that leave negative reviews on Steam. Let's start off with talking about the visuals, which is probably my favorite thing about this game. I love this art style to death. It is what originally caught my eye when I saw a trailer, I think at E3 or some game show, where I went, what is that? And I immediately saw the early access was then available and I purchased it instantly and I didn't regret it. All of the characters and enemies have their own unique flair to them, and so they all stick out wonderfully. This game was clearly made with a distinct vision, and I think that's what appealed to me the most. My only complaint with the art style is I don't really like how it looks when the lighting of the torch is at a certain amount. I don't really like how it gives off this RNG feel to it. I'd rather have it either pitch black or when it's at full light. There are 15 classes for the base game, along with 2 extra DLC ones. One for the Crimson Court, which is an expansion that adds on a whole new area, and then the Shield Breaker DLC, which is just the character which you can get for $4. You can recruit new characters at the stagecoach after every mission in the town. The combat, like I said earlier, is turn-based. Your party is organized into 4 slots, first to fourth going right to left. Specific characters have strengths and weaknesses depending on what slot they are in your party. Certain enemies do have the ability to rearrange your party, but don't worry, you're able to move them back mid-combat. It's just going to take up the turn for each character. When killing enemies, they leave their corpses, which takes up a slot in their party. You could then clear out the corpse to be able to shuffle their party forward. This was an addition that was kind of controversial because a lot of people didn't like it at first, myself included, but they did introduce the ability to turn it off in the options. I'm going to briefly explain each of the classes. The Abomination is a person that can shapeshift between their human form and a monster form. This transformation and the monster form itself will give your party stress. Stress is a mechanic that I'll be explaining later in the video. Since the Abomination is deemed a demon, you cannot have him in the same party with any religious characters. That means the Crusader, the Vestal, or the Leper. If you don't like this, you could easily take it out by going into the game's data files and changing the code, or you could install a mod on the Steam Workshop, which they recently added. The Antiquarian was the most recently added character before the DLCs, and in my opinion is the worst character in the game. I don't think they're useful. What she does can be done by any other character better. The only time that I'd actually ever take this character is if I'm trying to grind out gold. When you have the Antiquarian in your party, you're able to discover rare antiques, which you can take with you to sell back at the shop at the end of the mission. When she was released, you could load up with 4 Antiquarians, have no torchlight at all, which increases rare drop rates, and then just farm out possibly like 100,000 gold. This was patched very quickly because they realized how much of a terrible idea it was. You can still do this and stack up 4 Antiquarians with no torchlight, but it will not give you the same exact results as it did on release. The Arbalist is your long-range sniper class for the game. They excel at being in the 3rd and 4th position of your party, and are terrible in 1st and 2nd. They have the ability to mark opponents, which gives them a debuff. Usually it is either lower defense or lower dodge rate. This also increases crit chance for other certain characters. Since they're an Arbalist, they have a ton of AoE arrow-based attacks. Most of these apply debuffs, so this is really useful when you have a squad where you go first with the Arbalist because they're really fast. They debuff the enemies, then you send in your heavy hitters to finish them off. The Bounty Hunter is one of the heavy hitters, or as I like to call him, Crit God, because when he's paired up with characters that add marks to people, certain attacks of his deal extra damage. So then you could end up, if you just dump all of your stats and attack bonuses into him, him, then he'll be dealing about 80 damage an attack, and it's fucking insane. He also has a unique quirk which allows him to deal extra damage to size 2 enemies, meaning enemies that take up 2 slots of their 4 party. He makes dealing with certain bosses a breeze just by this effect alone. Crusader is probably the most bland of all of the characters just because he doesn't have as interesting abilities compared to everybody else. Not saying this is a bad thing, because I do still enjoy using the Crusader, he just feels like he's outshined by later introduced ones. His most interesting attack is Zealous Acquisition, which hits the first 2 characters of the opponent's party and does extra damage to unholy monsters. Other than that, he just swings his sword and shoves a lance, and he has a very piss-piddle weak heal. But he is a part of my favorite playstyle party, which I'll be getting into later. Grave Robber is a shuffle style character which moves around the party, either forward or backwards based on her attacks. She specializes in attacking the middle 2 characters of the opponent's party. She also has an attack steroid which she can give to herself. I think it would be a little too broken if she could give it to others. She's really good at disarming traps which you will run into while traversing the dungeons. The Hellion is the first character you look at and go, yeah, this is just the Crusader, but better. She has the slice attack, she has the 2 character AoE slice, she has the buff, she has the lunge, she is more durable and her output is higher. Depending on what kind of classes you recruit, she is going to carry you a lot through the early to mid game. The Highwayman is your standard thief class. He excels in being in the first and the second slots. He has a dagger and a pistol, so he's able to hit people from afar, which also gives him an AoE attack. It does less damage than the precise one, but it's still good nonetheless, and he has close range attacks with the dagger, so even if your party gets shuffled around, you don't have to worry about him being useless. The Houndmaster, as I see it, is a jack of all trades, master of none. He has range attacks with the dog, along with melee attacks that stun enemies, but what he excels at most is probably his marking ability, which goes hand in hand with the bounty hunter. Whenever you have the Houndmaster with you, you get a special item, the dog biscuits, which will give him stat boosts. The Jester is probably the most peculiar class in the game. I'm almost positive during the early access period of this, it was fucking terrible. I mean like dog shit unplayable. That or I was just too stupid and didn't understand what I had to do. But after a bit of playing with him, I finally figured out what he really excelled at, and that was his 2 moves that shuffle him from the 4th slot to the 1st slot and then back. Those being Solo and Finale. Solo moves you forward 3 spaces, increases your speed by 5, and increases Finale's damage by 50% for 7 turns. Finale moves you back by 3 spaces and gives you a debuff of minus 25 dodge for 12 turns. But its damage is immense. This is the best finisher in the game. It helps deal with so many problem targets. If you just dump a bunch of buffs onto the Jester, he could honestly probably one-shot any large enemy late game. They're also the best way to deal with stress, but again, I'll go in more depth what that system is later. The Leper is probably my second favorite class in the game. To describe them is, if you've seen Konosuba, their darkness. Their damage is fucking amazing, but their accuracy is so awful. He's really good when paired with certain characters that can help him by increasing his stats like accuracy, like the next character I'm about to introduce, the Man-at-Arms. He's definitely my favorite character in this game, and I think he's probably the best and most broken. The stats he increases are so fucking useful when trying to trudge through really long endeavors, and the protection he applies to other characters is just top fucking notch. He's just too good. His design is what I based my D&D character on, but that's a story for another time. If you love gambling and taking terrible chances at the worst possible situations, then the Occultist is right up your alley for being your healer. If you talk to anyone who's played Darkest Dungeon and mention the Occultist, they will tell you the horror stories of +0 heal, inflict bleeding to your party members. There's shit tons of memes about this fucking character, but when he's not giving you the 0 heal and the bleed, he's giving you the +30 health, and it is fucking useful. He also has a unique quirk where he does extra damage against eldritch based monsters. Now, to explain the Plague Doctor, I have to talk about status ailments. I briefly mentioned one of them earlier, which was bleed. Each of these status ailments do certain things each time a character's turn starts. Bleed does an X amount of damage each time a turn starts, but it doesn't affect undead and unholy monsters. Blight is somewhat like the poison of this game. It is a corrosive damage that works really good against unholy enemies because they can't bleed because they're, skeletons, and I feel that stun is self-explanatory enough. The Plague Doctor can do all of these, along with healing all of these status ailments from your party. So when you go on missions to areas like the Weld, it is definitely recommended to take them with you because that has a high percentage chance you're going to be continuously afflicted with blight from the enemies there. And now our last base game character is the Vestal. She is your stereotypical cleric. She heals individually really well, and she also has a full party heal, along with some offensive abilities that hit any part of the party, but it requires her to be in the 3rd and 4th slot of your party. She also has a really weak melee attack if she is shifted forward to the first one, so you might want to take it if you're prone to being shuffled around. I had to say overall she is a better healer than the occultist, but if you want to run parties with the abomination, you're not going to be able to take her with you because she is religious. The Flagellant was a character introduced during the Crimson Court DLC. I'm a little disappointed that for it we didn't get an actual vampire class, but he is still really cool and interesting. He definitely plays differently than anybody else in the game. I really should have experimented more with him before doing this video because I honestly don't know how to really describe him other than he plays around the lack of health of other characters and being injured. As of the time of recording, the Shield Breaker is our final character for this game. Who knows with the DLC, The Color of Madness, coming out soon, that probably will change. But the Shield Breaker excels at being in a party where their placement in the group doesn't really matter because she shuffles around a lot with lunge attacks, somewhat similar to the Grave Robber. I'm so far really enjoying her, and I think I'm going to have her replace my Crusader in my shuffle playstyle party. A few playstyles you might want to try out is, like I said earlier, the shuffle playstyle, where you have your highwayman in the 1st slot, your lunge character in the 2nd slot, then you could have whatever you want in the 3rd. Usually I take the man-at-arms to buff up my other characters, and then for the 4th slot, your healer. Whenever the highwayman uses his own personal lunge attack, it activates Riposte, which means he will do a counterattack when he's attacked by other enemies. His attack that he can only use in his 1st slot, which uses the knockback mechanic, increases his crit tremendously. Another great strategy is the Crit God strat, where you have the bounty hunter in your 1st slot, you take either the houndsman, the arbalist, or the occultist, who all have a marking ability, along with the man-at-arms who will buff up your party, and then just have your bounty hunter strike everybody down, because he crits for 90 fucking damage each time. One of the unique mechanics that makes Darkest Dungeon stick out from other turn-based strategy games is its quirk and affliction system. Every character has a stress bar. When their stress bar is filled, they will have a chance of either becoming afflicted or virtuous. The affliction debuffs are paranoia, selfish, irrational, fearful, hopeless, abusive, and masochistic. Virtuous is an exclusive one for the Flagellant. These afflictions will cause your characters to act crazy and take control of themselves, so they can either pass their turn, move themselves to take cover, say mean things to other party members which will then increase their stress more, and many more things you'll have to come to find out. I didn't know this for the longest time, but if you actually make afflicted characters' stress meter go down to 0, because certain characters like the Jester have stress heals, then they will actually become unafflicted. But that's incredibly difficult. There's about only one fight in the entire game where I think you can easily pull this off. Virtues are where your character overcomes their fears and becomes more powerful, and are applied one of these 5 buffs: powerful, courageous, stalwart, vigorous, focused. When your said character becomes virtuous, usually they lower the stress of everyone else in the party. Each of these 5 buffs all have their own unique traits. If you somehow have a party who all gets max stress and all become virtuous, I recommend pausing the game and going to buy a lottery ticket, because you are the luckiest fucking person on earth right now. Virtue and affliction are both temporary and will only last for the rest of this mission. Afflictions, though, do have to be treated in the town by going to one of the few places for stress relief. In the tavern, your characters can drink, gamble, or attend the brothel. If they are religious, they can go to the church. You can either meditate, pray, or go to have some fun time with the whips. This is where quirks come in. Quirks are positive and negative traits each character uniquely has to themselves. For example, one of your characters can have Beast Hater, so that means they deal extra damage versus beast type enemies. But they could also have Zoophobia, which means they'll get 20% increased stress when fighting beast type enemies. Keeping an eye on characters' quirks are really important when deciding who you want to take on certain expeditions in certain areas. This also comes in when having stress relievers. Characters may only want to do one certain thing or the other. But this also runs into the issue sometimes where you could have a negative quirk being they only gamble, but because they were caught cheating, they can no longer gamble. So you have to go to the sanitarium and remove their desire to only gamble for stress relief. The sanitarium is also used to remove diseases. Diseases give yourself buffs and debuffs. Rabies decreases your accuracy, but increases your damage by 15%. So it's a pretty good trade-off in my opinion. The guild and blacksmith in town are your stereotypical places you go to upgrade abilities and your armor. All structures in the towns can be upgraded, which gives you more bonuses like reduced prices and the option to go further into the perk trees. These all can be upgraded either using gold or the items you can collect during your expeditions. Trinkets are items you're able to find during your missions in the dungeons, along with being able to purchase them at the wagon. These are items you could equip to your characters to give them buffs. Some are generic and there's also class specific ones. Each of them have a drawback and a plus. This item may increase my damage by 20%, but I do lose 30% of my HP, making me a glass cannon. If you find the game too hard and unforgiving, I think the best thing to do is install the mod that takes away all the debuffs buffs from the trinkets, because it does make the game a little bit easier, but it doesn't completely break it. Missions are divided up into 3 types: short, medium, and long. Medium and up missions will allow you to camp. Each character has their own unique ability during camping. An example is, the Jester will be able to play a song for everybody that could lower their stress. You can be ambushed while camping at night, so your torch will be turned down to 0. So any characters that have the quirk that make their accuracy lower or gain increasing stress below a certain point of light will be drastically hurt from this. This can be mitigated by taking characters like the Bounty Hunter or the Grave Robber who are able to set up traps at night. No game is perfect, and after praising it for 15 minutes, I think it's a little fair to give some critiques on it. Mission variance is a little low, and it's going to seem a little repetitive during the mid-game unless you really like the game. There's only about 3 mission types in total: explore X amount of the dungeon, fight in every room battle, or activate/collect X amount of items that are scattered throughout the dungeon. You have to fight each boss 3 times. I think I was more disappointed and bothered by this because they have different names in the checklist of bosses you need to defeat, so I was expecting something different instead of just a different name and maybe a new move or 2. The Apprentice Necromancer and the Necromancer Lord don't have too much variance between them, other than their damage and maybe a new move. I understand why it's like this. They are a team of 9 people and on a budget, but I do think a little bit more variance would have been nice. If my playtime on Steam is an indication if this is a deal breaker or not, I think you could come to that conclusion yourself. The game takes a lot of different ideas and puts them into an amalgamation that's neatly put into a bow by the narration by Wade June. The game could have honestly looked like shit and his narration would have carried it on its own. It's so fucking great. There's so many quotes and memes based on what he says. It's fucking fantastic. Red Hook even put out an audio package called Ancestral Bestowment, which was Wayne June doing announcements for Twitch streamers, which is free to use for anybody who would like to download it. A link for it will be in the description below. There's also a lot of side content you guys can check out, like the character comics they release on their website, which give a lot more backstory into the characters themselves and really makes them personable. There's not one out for every character as of the recording right now, but hopefully one day all of them will be complete. They've also recently announced the release date for The Color of Madness, which is June 19th. I personally have not seen anything other than the one promotional image that I'm showing on the screen right now, so I'm really excited to see what they have in store for us in that. If by chance any of the guys at Red Hook do happen to see this video, I want to say thanks for this fucking amazing ass game, and I'm very excited for when you'll make the art book available to people who weren't backers. There are a few things I didn't mention in this video, but I do want to have some surprises for you guys when you play the game. For those who have managed to complete this game in Stygian mode, I don't know how the hell you fucking did this. You are inhuman. My last word of warning before I sign out here is if you think you're ready to do level 3 dungeons, I think you should grind a little bit longer in the lower ones because you're in for a rude awakening. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you did enjoy this video. I do really want to start doing some more videos where I'm able to talk about things I like because most of my content is purely negative based. Hope you look forward to my next positive recommendation video, which is going to be a you should watch. I'm not going to spoil what it is just yet, but I'm going to give you a little hint at the end of the video. So again, thanks for watching, guys, and see you next time.
No, that's all wrong! Look how stiff your arms are! Stretch your body! Be like rubber! More! You're not even trying!
Mr. Shirogami! Let go of her, please! Somebody call an ambulance!
Hardly worth my time.